Welcome to this meeting of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Board for the National Register of Historic Places. The date is February 6, 2024. My name is Lindsay Dyer. I'm currently the chair of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board. Our purpose this evening is to consider the nomination of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. As most of you know, the National Register of Historic Places is a federal list of those places deemed worthy of preservation. A nomination form has been completed for the properties that will be considered tonight. The nomination form has been sent to the review board members, and each member has had an opportunity to study it prior to this meeting. The owners of nominated properties, local officials, and interested local groups have been notified of this meeting. All have been invited to send written comments about the nomination and to attend the meeting. Some of you may wish to speak this evening about the properties. You are welcome to do so, and I encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether that property meets the criteria established by the National Register of Historic Places. These criteria are the standards by which the review board will evaluate the nomination. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. These criteria have been established by federal regulation. Copies of the criteria have been sent to owners of the nominated properties and to the other parties I mentioned earlier. A description of the National Register of Historic Places program has also been sent to them. The nominations will be presented by a staff member. Persons viewing the meeting remotely will be given the opportunity to comment. These comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board will then discuss the nominations, and a vote by the board will follow. Should a nomination be determined this evening to meet the criteria for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places, the nomination will be forwarded to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong. Should she agree that the property meets the criteria and the nomination is in proper form, she will sign the nomination and forward it to the National Register of Historic Places office in Washington, D.C., where it will be reviewed once more. The process is a lengthy one, but it is calculated to subject each property to rigorous evaluation. Before we begin, I would like to take attendance and ask members of the State Historic Preservation Review Board to introduce themselves, briefly stating the role they fill on the review board and their particular expertise. I would also like to have a special welcome to our newest board member, Casey Radford. Casey, when I call your name for roll call, it would be great if you took a minute to introduce yourself. Thank you. All right, so we will start with board member Anderson.
I'm Kristen Anderson. I'm one of the architectural historians on the board, and I teach art history and architectural history at Augsburg University in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Board member Gladhill.
I'm Bethany Gladhill. I serve as a member at large on the board, and I am a nonprofit consultant, but also a preservation consultant.
Thank you. Board member James.
Hi, my name is Elliot James. I'm Associate Professor of History at University of Minnesota Morris, and I serve as one of the historians on the board.
Thank you. Board member Levasseur. Is she here tonight? Can we see her? Oh, all right, we'll move on. Board member Mann.
Hi, my name is Rob Mann. I am a professor of anthropology at St. Cloud State University, and I serve as the historical archaeologist on the board.
Thank you. Board member Olson.
Hi, my name's Steve Olson. I am a member at large on the board. I am a grain farmer, and I am a professional civil engineer.
Thank you. And board member Radford.
I am Casey Radford. I am filling one of the positions of historic architect on the board. I'm new, as you know. And I currently work at McDonald & Mack as an architect over there. And what else about me? I've been working in preservation for almost 20 years between Colorado and here at various firms. I went to undergrad at the University of Minnesota and grad school in Colorado. That's why I ended up out there, but home is here, so I ended up back here. I've served as, or I've been architect and consultant for historic preservation. And also I did work for a short time for a design build firm in the South Metro that did industrial and warehouse type buildings. And I live in River Falls with my husband, 3 kids, 6, 4, and 6 months, and 1 Great Dane and 2 cats. That's me in a nutshell.
Oh, you have a full house.
Full house, very full house. So, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Board Member Sanders. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, is that working?
Yep, good.
Well, my name is Tom Sanders. I'm a board member at large. I'm an archaeologist. Retired from the Minnesota Historic Society. I had 36 years in historic sites and 28 years at the Minnesota Historic Society.
Thank you. Board Member Schulke.
Hi, I'm Chris Schulke. I'm a board member at large. I'm the executive director of the Otter Tail County Historical Society, and I serve as a historian.
Thank you. Board Member Solomonson.
Hello, I'm Kate Solomonson. I teach the history of architecture at the University of Minnesota, and I serve as an architectural historian on the board.
Thank you. Board Member Stark.
Hi, I'm John Stark. I'm on the board. I'm a historic architect, and I am a practicing architect in Minneapolis doing preservation work and all sorts of stuff. And welcome, Casey.
All right, Board Member White, I believe is out tonight. And Board Member Worcester.
I am Mike Worcester. I am a fearless pizza delivery driver, and I am also the executive director of the Morrison County Historical Society in Little Falls, and I am here as a historian.
Thank you. I am Board Member Dyer, and I am a member at large. I work at the Minnesota Historical Society in Capital and Public Art. So thank you for introducing yourselves. I would now like to hear from SHPO staff this evening. David.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Chair Dyer. Good evening. My name is David Mather. I'm the National Register Archaeologist at the State Historic Preservation Office. Deputy SHPO Amy Swong is away this evening, and I am filling in for her for program announcements. I want to start by welcoming the board and the public to this meeting and to inform everyone that the meeting is in compliance with the state of Minnesota's open meeting requirements as a virtual meeting under Minnesota Statute 13D. No one is in person at the meeting tonight. No board members are gathered together in the same room, and the meeting is being recorded. At the start, we've already had a roll call of the board to establish that we have a quorum. We ask that board members have your microphones muted when you are not speaking and have your cameras on when you are speaking. We want to make sure that everyone can hear one another and that members of the public are able to hear all of the board discussion and all of the verbal responses. All votes are going to be taken this evening by verbal roll call, and everyone here clearly has already found the meeting link to join, but for the record, the meeting announcement and related information are available on the website. SHPO staff and Chair Dyer will be watching the chat function, and to any members of the public who joined, please utilize that for questions and to request time to speak regarding a nomination. For program announcements, we wanted to let you know good news that Mni Owe Sni, also known as Coldwater Spring in Hennepin County, was listed in the National Register on November 3rd, 2023. This traditional cultural place was the first concurrent federal and state nomination in Minnesota's program history. You may recall that after the nomination was approved at our May 2023 meeting, it was returned to the federal agency, which in this case is the National Park Service, for final review and to be submitted to the keeper through the federal process. This is a particularly important listing for historic preservation in Minnesota, in my opinion, because currently we have so few traditional cultural places that have been identified and listed. We sincerely hope that that number will increase soon, and there are indeed a few in the pipeline. Also, speaking of TCPs, there's a second draft of the updated National Register Bulletin 38 that the National Park Service has distributed for comment. The comment period ends on March 25th, and it's posted online. We can share the listing if anyone wants that. And it's my understanding that they intend to publish the updated bulletin later this year, which will be a really nice step forward. And last, I also want to introduce the other SHPO staff here tonight. Our National Register Program Coordinator and Architectural Historian, Ginny Way, will present the nominations to the board this evening. John Disher is working his WebEx magic to make this online meeting run smoothly, and we greatly appreciate him for that. You're aware that longtime staff member Michelle Decker has retired, and we're sad about that, although happy for her. And we are also very happy that Lillian Egner has joined the staff as our new office and administrative specialist. Hooray! Lillian is here tonight, and I'd like to invite her to say a few words to introduce herself, after which we'll turn things back over to Chair Dyer to continue the meeting. So, Lillian.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to being a part of this process. I'm new to state government, new to SHPO, of course. I came from a background of administration as far as program management and nonprofits and the arts, but I've been a longtime lover and appreciator of art and architecture with an art history background from college. And so it's a really perfect background melding with my administrative skills. So I'm really looking forward to supporting the tax credit program as well as the National Register, of course.
So thank you very much, Lillian, and Chair Dyer. We'll turn it back over to you to proceed.
All right, thank you. Welcome, Lillian. So happy to have you. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the review of the minutes from the November 14th, 2023 meeting. Are there any corrections to the distributed minutes? There are no corrections. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Board Member Gladhill, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member Stark, second.
Thank you. We will now vote by roll call. Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Gladhill.
Aye.
James.
Aye.
And has Lavasser joined? No. Okay, Mann.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Radford.
Can I vote aye if I wasn't here?
You would abstain.
Oh,
Abstain.
Thank you. Okay, Sanders.
Aye.
Schulke.
Aye.
Solomonson.
Aye.
Stark.
Aye.
Worcester.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair votes aye. Minutes have been approved. Thank you. Now we move on to the presentation of the nomination with some instruction. For our nomination this evening, we are going to use the following format. There will be a staff presentation of the nomination, followed by a summary of correspondence received. At that point, I will then invite and call on those who would like to speak about the specific property. We ask that you use the chat function, or if you are unable to access the chat, raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak. Please do not use the chat function for any other purpose. For those wishing to speak, we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Our first and only nomination this evening is St. George Serbian Orthodox Church in St. Louis County, presented by Ginny Way. Ginny?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Dyer. I will share my screen. Are you able to see that? So tonight's presentation is St. George Serbian Orthodox Church, Duluth, St. Louis County. Charlene Royce is the author of Charlene Royce Historian LLC. St. George Serbian Orthodox Church is located in a residential neighborhood within the community of Gary, which can be found on the south end of the city of Duluth. Gary, by neighborhoods of Morgan Park and New Duluth, were communities that largely housed employees of the U.S. Steel Corporation subsidiary, the Minnesota Steel Company. The church complex consists of 3 parts: the church building, completed in 1924, a parish house, completed in 1950, and then moved to make room for a fellowship hall building, constructed in 1972, which is also connected via a subterranean link to the church basement. At left is a rendering from a program for the consecration of the hall cornerstone, circa 1972. At right is the nomination boundary, showing each of the 3 buildings. Serbs arrived on the Iron Range in the late 19th century in search of work and an opportunity for greater freedoms. The language barrier and their lesser status as recent arrivals consigned most immigrants to entry-level jobs in construction and at factories, railroads, and logging operations. Generations of immigrant men found work beginning in 1913 with the construction of the Minnesota Steel Plant and then through its continued operation. Ministry to Orthodox Serbs in Duluth was initially done by Serbian, Russian, and Romanian Orthodox missionaries and priests from Chisholm Parish. Services were usually held in private homes. Duluth's concentration of Serbs grew the attention of the Serbian Orthodox hierarchy, who discussed the need to send priests there during a meeting in Chicago in 1916. Finally, in 1923, Father Vladimir Purbich succeeded in assembling the nucleus of a new congregation in Gary. Before the congregation had its own building, meetings continued to be held in private homes. At left is a view of the church, fellowship hall, and parish home looking southeast. At right is a detail of the 1923 cornerstone with a Serbian inscription on the south corner of the front facade of the church, looking east. Designed by the Duluth architecture firm Gullison and Elginson and completed in 1924, the St. George Serbian Orthodox Church features the Byzantine Revival style. Studies of Serbian church architecture note a rich variety of influences from Asia, Greece, and Rome. The church building is a physical manifestation of the faith and plays an important role in worship services. St. George's Church takes the motifs from precedents set by Serbian cathedrals and churches, such as the arched brickwork patterns, corner towers, domed forms, and gilded Byzantine crosses, and articulates these in a more modest design scaled to the local level. On the left is a view of the front and south facades of the church, camera looking northeast. At right is the north facade of the curved apse and the east facade of the church, camera looking southwest. In keeping with the Serbian Orthodox tradition, the interior of St. George's is highly ornate and includes ample iconography. The church has a total of 22 stained glass windows that have been slowly installed, replacing the plain glass as the congregation is able. The subjects of each window follow a program developed at the time the church was built. At left is the south wall of the nave, camera looking south, and at right and opposite view, the north wall of the nave, camera looking north. In Serbian Orthodox churches, a screen, known as an iconostasis, separates the sacred area surrounding the altar from the nave, and much of the service takes place behind this screen, which is traditionally ornamented with icons and other symbols. St. George's congregation could not initially afford an elaborate screen when the church was open, and worshipped without one for more than 2 decades. The push to install a screen became more pressing after the church was consecrated in 1942, and it became more feasible with the prosperity generated by local industries during World War II. At left is a view of the interior of the nave, camera looking southeast towards the iconostasis from the balcony. At right is a view of the sanctuary behind the iconostasis, view looking south. The church hired the Scott Graff Company to fabricate the structural components of the iconostasis. Artist David Erickson was hired to work on the most important feature of the screen, the icons themselves. In 1946, 24 oil-painted canvases depicting subjects of the saints in the Orthodox Church style were installed within the completed frame. From left to right are details of the north section, middle, and southern section of the iconostasis, camera looking east for each. Here are some additional photographs of the interior of the church. At left, we see the stairs and the narthex leading up to the balcony. And at right is the interior of the nave looking southwest towards the balcony and narthex. St. George rented houses for its priests and their families until the late 1940s, when the congregation decided to build a parish home on a lot directly south of the church. Architects Gullinson and Ellingson were again called to prepare plans, which were issued in 1949. The cornerstone for the building was laid and dedicated on October 9th. After trouble with construction, the permanent residence for the priest and his family was finally dedicated August 27, 1950. At left, we see the front and the south facades of the parish home as it stands today, looking northeast. At right is a view of the rectory in its original location, circa 1950. As it approached its 50th anniversary, the congregation considered a new hall for fellowship and education activities that had outgrown the church's small basement. After much deliberation on the placement of the fellowship hall, the congregation bought a lot directly south of the parish home's original location. The house was then moved, and 2 bedrooms were added to accommodate the priest's growing family. The home's former site was used for the new hall, which could be connected to the church's basement by a tunnel. John Ivy Thomas was the architect for the addition, which was completed in 1972. At left are the front and south facades of the fellowship hall, camera looking northeast. At right is a detail of the link between the church and the fellowship hall, looking east. It's barely discernible from the front, but you can see the small link between the 2 larger buildings. By the 21st century, the congregation and the community surrounding the church had evolved. By the end of the century, St. George's congregation had dropped to around 130 families. Despite the loss of parishioners, St. George Serbian Orthodox Church remains a critical link for the Serbian community in St. Louis County. At left is the main meeting room, also known as the Fellowship Hall, camera looking southeast. At right is the entry lobby within the Fellowship Hall building, camera looking northwest. The period of significance for this property is 1924 to 1974. The level of significance is local. The National Register criteria are A and C. The areas of significance are ethnic heritage, European, and architecture. The period of significance begins with the 1924 construction of the church and extends to 1974, in keeping with the National Park Service's guidelines for continuing significance. The significance results from association with broad patterns in religious and ethnic histories, and therefore meets criterion consideration A. St. George's has maintained a long and deep relationship with its Serbian origins, reflecting traditions brought to this country by Serbian immigrants more than a century ago. The church building itself is also a distinct local example of the Byzantine Revival style. For these reasons, the St. George Serbian Orthodox Church is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There is no correspondence related to this nomination.
Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
John, is there anyone who has signed up to speak, or anybody from the public here?
Chair Dyer, no, we have no requests to speak.
Okay, in that case, the public comment period is now closed. In order for the board to discuss, may I have a motion regarding this nomination?
Board Member Schulke, I so move that we accept this nomination for the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member Worcester seconds.
Thank you. It is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion related to this nomination?
Yeah, this is Board Member Schulke, and I have a kind of a question. So I understand that, and maybe I should have realized this prior, that religious institutions, churches, are not necessarily considered for the National Register. Is that correct? Because as a religious institution, according to separation of church and state, it has to fit one of the other criteria, such as architecture. I found that fascinating, or I mean, very informative for myself. I guess I didn't realize that, Jenny.
That has always been true. Yes, criterion consideration A is the concept that we are not nominating a property because of its religion or its association with any particular religion. That religion also has to be, and typically is under criterion A focal point of community and ethnic tradition. So it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that this is a Christian church or an Orthodox church. It has to do with the culture's,
right.
The cultural significance of the Serbian Orthodox Church to immigrants.
Right, and that was obviously made clear through the nomination. So I did appreciate that.
Thank you. Board Member Stark and then Board Member Worcester.
Yeah, the culturally significant kind of stuff is the icons and just how they were all fit in there was amazing. I've read about a lot of that stuff in historical novels that I've read throughout the years, and it was fun to see something like that. There is something I noticed in a minor little detail. It's the number of resources within the property at the beginning of this. It talks about 2, but there are 3 buildings.
Thank you.
And same property maybe, but they linked it together. Including the social hall area building, it fits programmatically nice. I like the way it all goes together. There's nothing great about the architecture, but it makes the whole thing work together. It was in the period of significance, so I think that's okay. So yeah, definitely in favor of this.
And I encourage you, if you're ever in Duluth and Gary, go. They're wonderful. And seeing that iconostasis in person, I can't express how overpowering it is. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Board Member Worcester?
Thank you. I had the same comment as Chris did about the whole separation with religious properties, et cetera. But my other question was, and I was trying to go back and look in this and I might have missed it. Who is the property owner again?
The church itself. There are 2 technical owners. So the church owns all but the 10 feet of right-of-way that's owned by the MnDOT and the city of Duluth. So we did have to notify both the state of Minnesota, the MnDOT right-of-way, as well as the church. But the church, this was a legacy grant project, so the churches are the entity that has pushed forward the nomination.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill, was that your question answered?
It was indeed. I had those same 2 questions about number of resources and ownership.
And can one of you tell me exactly, not exactly page number where, but is the count off, or was it in the narrative that the description misdescribes?
It's in the count at the beginning.
It's just like the 3rd page.
The form itself. Thank you. I'll get that fixed. I am also going to update the period of significance. The copy you got was through 1973. That has now been, we've now moved into the new year. So technically 50 years is 1974. I will update that before sending to the National Park Service.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
Can I make
Yep.
a comment?
Go ahead, Tom.
I was wondering that there's a picture of the church with some cars in front of it. I know this is a small thing, but they say the cars are from 1957. They look like they're from 1954 to me. A small thing, but it's a...
I will insert a circa. I am curious about your knowledge of cars that you can, based on a photograph, distinguish a 1954 car from a 1957 car.
Well, one thing, I was alive then. and I remember them. Yeah, I'm a car nut, so.
I love it. That's great. Yep, I will make sure that that has the appropriate buffer language.
Right, the one in the middle is a Ford, and one on the end is a General Motors. I'd have to look at it, but it might be a Pontiac or Chevy. Same body style.
That's wonderful. I don't think a car buff was there labeling. Most of these photographs were part of a display in the fellowship hall that the author was able to look at. So
Yeah, the other photograph is from the 1960s.
I'm sorry?
There's another photograph that you showed that has cars from the 1960s.
Noted. Thank you.
I'll join in and help him with the car picking. I'm pretty picky about that. It was easy back in the 50s to tell which year it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I love it. This is fantastic news. I know who to call next time I can't place a photo that has a car in it, clearly.
Do you any other comments or questions? All right, the motion before the board is to recommend that this nomination is approved for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. We will now vote by roll call. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Radford.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, now we will be moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is the recommendation for removal of properties from the National Register of Historic Places. The first of three properties recommended for removal from the National Register of Historic Places. This is Zetterberg Company in Kennebec County. This item is presented by Ginny Way. Ginny?
Thank you. As Chair Dyer explained, this is the Zetterberg Company in Mora, Kennebec County. The author is Emily Gansell. According to Title 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 60.15A1, a property is removed from the National Register of Historic Places when it, quote, has ceased to meet the criteria for listing in the National Register because the qualities which caused it to be originally listed have been lost or destroyed, end quote. The Zetterberg Company in Mora, Kennebec County was raised in 2014. The photo at left reflects the property when it was nominated in 1980, while the image at right shows the parcel where the property once stood. Because it has lost the historic qualities that made it eligible for listing, the property must be removed from the National Register. We have no correspondence related to this action.
Thank you, Ginny. Is there any public comment for this, John?
No public comment.
Okay, public comment period is now closed. In order for the board to discuss, may I have a motion regarding this nomination? Solomonson?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to recommend that the deputy state historic preservation officer accept the removal of this property from the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Sanders. Is there any discussion related to this nomination? I see a couple of hands. Board Member Worcester, did you have a comment?
My one question is, do we need to do these separately or can they be done together as a block?
That's an excellent question.
But Ginny can.
We have in past always done them together. I am separately. I am not expert on Robert's rules.
That's fine. I was just curious.
You are though.
It's not a make or break for me, and I'm not going to bust out my Robert's Rules copy on my bookshelf. So I just was curious. Thank you,
I
though.
know you have one though.
I
Okay,
do have one.
if in future we can do that and we need to adjust the motion to allow for that, I think that everybody would be okay, and maybe you and I can talk before the next meeting.
It's not a big deal. Just was curious. Thank you.
Not that I don't like to say these sections over and over again.
Board Member Anderson.
Yeah, I wouldn't be okay with it. I think that
okay.
it's I mean it's a really quick thing to do, and I think that it's kind of the most honorable thing that we can do for these properties, you know, on their way out the door. Somebody took a lot of time to nominate them, and another state review board went through them. And so I think to spend, you know, I don't mean to be disagreeable or anything, but I think to spend 3 minutes or so on saying goodbye to these properties is the right thing to do. And it's not a make or break for me either. I'm just throwing my 2 cents in.
Okay, I think we'll keep on keeping on, and if we choose to have further discussion on this at some other point, we can revisit.
Is there any further discussion on this property? And I do see Board Member James's comment, couldn't want to make a motion. We could. I also echo Chair or Board Member Anderson's thoughts on just taking a moment for each one. So I think we'll just move forward with this. If there's no other comments on this Kennebec County Zetterberg Company property, we can go ahead with the vote by roll call. All right, so the motion before the board is to recommend that the State Historic Preservation Officer accept the removal of this property from the National Register of Historic Places. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Radford.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
And Chair votes aye. Thank you. Motion has passed. Moving along, the second property to be recommended for removal from the National Register of Historic Places is the Freeport Roller Mill and Miller's House in Stearns County. This item is presented by Ginny Way. Ginny?
Thank you, Chair Dyer. This is the Freeport Roller Mill and Miller's House, Freeport, Stearns County. The author is Emily Ganzel. According to Title 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 60.15A1, a property is removed from the National Register of Historic Places when, quote, the property has ceased to meet the criteria for listing in the National Register because the qualities which caused it to be originally listed have been lost or destroyed, end quote. Freeport Roller Mill in Freeport, Stearns County burned down on December 27th, 2011. The photo at the photo at upper right reflects the mill building when it was nominated in 1988, while the image at lower left shows the new building on the same parcel. The Miller's house still stands. However, the nomination indicates that the house, quote, with the mill, forms a significant remainder of the once common milling industry, end quote. Because the property overall has lost the historic qualities that made it eligible for listing, the property must be removed from the National Register. We have no correspondence related to this endeavor.
Thank you. Are there any public comments related to this nomination?
Chair Dyer, no public comments.
Thank you. So public comments portion is closed. May I have a motion regarding this nomination from the board? Board Member Stark?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer accepts the removal of this property from the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Board Member Mann, thank you. And thank you. It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion related to this nomination? Board Member Mann?
I just had a question as to whether or not the house could be renominated as a standalone structure if at some point in the future somebody wanted to undertake that.
It could be evaluated, but it would need to be evaluated on its own merit, not in relationship to the mill.
Right. So if you could make the case for the structure itself, irrespective of the mill, you could nominate it again.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right. So the motion before the board is to approve the accept the removal of this property from the National Register of Historic Places. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Board Member Anderson?
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill?
Aye.
Board Member James?
Aye.
Board Member Mann?
Aye.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Radford?
Aye.
Board Member Sanders?
Aye.
Board Member Schulke?
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson?
Aye.
Board Member Stark?
Aye.
Board Member Worcester?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Motion passes. Moving along, the third property to be recommended for removal from the National Register of Historic Places is the Eveleth Manual Training School in St. Louis County. This item is presented by Ginny. Thank you, Ginny.
Thank you, Chair Dyer. This is the Eveleth Manual Training School, Eveleth, St. Louis County. The author is Emily Ganzel. According to Title 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 60.15A1, a property is removed from the National Register of Historic Places when, quote, the property has ceased to meet the criteria for listing in the National Register because the qualities which caused it to be originally listed have been lost or destroyed, end quote. Eveleth Manual Training School in Eveleth, St. Louis County was raised in 2022. A photo at upper left reflects the property when it was nominated in 1982, while the image at lower right shows the property during demolition on June 2nd. Because it has lost the historic qualities that made it eligible for listing, the property must be removed from the National Register. We have no correspondence related to this property.
Thank you, Ginny. John, is there anybody, any public comments to share?
Chair Dyer, we have no public comments.
All right. In order to discuss, is there a motion from the board? Going once.
I'll move to recommend to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer to accept the removal of this property from the National Register of Historic Places. This is Board Member Gladhill.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Nope.
Board Member Schulke, second.
Board Member Schulke, second. Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion related to this nomination? Let's start with Board Member Worcester and then Board Member Stark.
Thank you. So I mean, I get it. There's really not much we can do because it was demolished, but I do have a couple of questions. One is, who owned the property when it was demolished? And number two, if it's a public entity that owned it, are there requirements about going through the process to get a demolition permit, especially since it's a publicly owned property? I was just kind of curious about that, if the school district itself owned it. That's kind of what I was thinking.
It is my understanding that the school district itself did own it, and did apply for a demolition permit and did go through the environmental assessment worksheet required by the Environmental Quality Board. We did comment on that through the Section 106, 138, the regulatory process. However, it is a recommendation, and the owner chose to move through the process of demolition regardless.
So if I may ask a follow-up, then the city of Evelyn then granted the demolition permit knowing that the property was on the register.
That is my understanding.
Okay, thank you. That was what I was wondering.
Board Member Stark.
I was just curious, know a little bit more about what a manual school is. Is that like carpentry and mechanics and stuff like that? By
Generally it
hand?
is. Yep, so manual training, the concept in the early 20th century for a post-secondary education in basically craftsmanship and arts.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Olson.
So I noticed that in CNN, when Anderson Cooper would go anywhere with a black T-shirt, the people would be very afraid. And so Emily Gansel is the consistent theme in all these removals. And if she shows up in a black T-shirt, I'm going to be concerned. So that's all I got.
Yep, Emily was paid. The State Historic Preservation Office did contract her to do a number of delistings almost 6 years ago. They were coming in just as I started, but because they're not a particularly exciting thing to discuss, Dennis Gardner was insistent that we do them a few at a time. But they're starting to be a little bit timely now, so you're going to get to see more simply because of administrative requirements. It's not her fault. Emily's lovely.
I got kicked out. I'm back. What did I miss?
Big fight.
Just talking about you and what you were wearing, that's all. Nothing.
Okay, I'm
voted,
sorry.
We voted no. We want to leave it on the register. I'm just kidding.
Okay, is there any further discussion? No, are we ready to move on for a roll call? Okay, so the motion before the board is to accept the removal of this property from the National Register of Historic Places. All those in favor say aye, opposed say no. Board Member Anderson?
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill?
Aye.
Board Member James?
Aye.
Board Member Mann?
Aye.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Radford?
Aye.
Board Member Sanders?
Aye.
Board Member Schulke?
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson?
Aye.
Board Member Stark?
Aye.
Board Member Worcester?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. And we are, let's see, Ginny, is there any, or David, is there any other updates from the SHPO staff that you'd like to share?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
All right. So do we have, in that case, do we have a motion to adjourn? Other, Ginny, do you have something?
I see board member.
Oh, I'm
Gladhill's
sorry.
hand.
Yeah, Board Member Gladhill.
Jenny, you referred to this kind of obliquely and guessing my question because you're good at that. Do we have a lot of removals coming down the pike?
We have a lot of removals sitting on my desk waiting for automatic delisting. When
Like a
you
lot
read the
like-
terms automatic delisting, that is me. Yes, so we do have a number that have been waylaid by for various reasons, but they've now been sitting in our office for sometimes 6 or 7 years, so it is time. These agendas that have fewer nominations seem to be an appropriate time to bring those forward. Next month, as I mentioned, we might have a more robust agenda, so we may not see any next month or next quarter, simply because, there's a lot to read.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board or staff? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Board Member Schulke, so moved.
Wonderful. Thank you. So this concludes the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board meeting. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.